got it handy. And Ellen, you don't need to put it up. All right, so there is an amendment proposed to H 941. Legislative Council has joined us to walk us through it. It's got my name on it. For expediency, just to move it forward. Doesn't have to just be my name on it. Last time we had everybody on the committee sign on, but sometimes wrangling everybody at the last minute is difficult. So at the moment, just got my name. In any case, good morning, Ellen. If you want to walk us through, I think everyone's had a chance to look at this, but maybe not really absorb it. So helpful to have you here too.
All right, Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So today you're looking at draft 3.1 of an amendment to H 941 municipal regulation of farming. And so it's dated last night at 4 o'clock. It is fairly close in a lot of ways to what this committee passed out, except that it doesn't have any reference to tier areas. And so I'll walk you through it. The changes are primarily in the section 3, where there's the language on 4412 about what limited things a town could regulate that would also be farming.
Representative Nelson.
Been thinking a lot about taking out the tier areas. And I really support that because there are a lot of communities that may not opt into A or B, and they still have zoning and whatnot. So it just gives the protections.
Yeah. We heard that from the Environment Committee. I think that was their concern. One of their big concerns. Yeah.
All right, so section 1 is still the finding section, and this has not changed. And section 2 is very similar to what you passed out of committee. So section 2 amends 4413 of Title 12. 4413D is the section that states what towns cannot regulate through zoning. So they cannot regulate farming that meets the minimum threshold criteria and required agricultural practices rule, and is therefore required to comply with that agricultural practices rule. On to page 2, except as described in 4412, which is what you had set up originally also. It then goes on to say towns can't regulate the construction of a farm structure as defined by the RAPS. And then it does add here also, towns can't regulate the cultivation or other use of land for growing plants for food, for personal use, donation, or sale, including orchard crops, viticultural crops, and maple sap. And then it has the definition that food means an article or agricultural commodities for human or animal consumption. So that provision has been in your bill, but it's moved a couple of times. And so now it is part of the statute that says towns cannot prohibit the growing of plants for food. The next subdivision is new. So subdivision D on page 2, towns cannot regulate the cultivation of ornamental plants.
This was, I'll just interrupt and say, this was a request of the Environment Committee. And it originated with somebody who grows flowers. So they thought, let's add that too. And I know we talked about it briefly. If there was any strong objection, that's in the Environment Committee requested that. So, John.
Just wondering, could that be construed to mean you can have invasive plants?
An invasive plant could be an ornamental plant.
Yeah.
Regulate that.
That would mean that a town could not regulate an ornamental plant that happened to be invasive.
Should we just put a little thing in there, say cultivation of ornamental plants not considered or not deemed to be invasive?
Possibly, yeah.
We'll get into the definition.
It doesn't really cut down on it.
Greg?
What is there anything in statute right now that addresses invasives and does the state have authority to
I believe so. Go ahead.
I can't see
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
yeah, Bradley Sherman, Office of Legislative Counsel, ENR does, regulate invasive species, including, trying to offer, mitigation efforts, to remove them. I'm not familiar with an issue of someone affirmatively growing an invasive species, or coming into that, so I'm not familiar with how that might play out. But the state already does have authority to control invasive species through ANR.
I'm thinking about a shrub that.
Firebush or something.
Yeah,
Japanese
Honeysuckle.
knotweed.
Bamboo, there, it's like half the invasives were all
Yeah.
nursery plants originally,
yeah.
or more, maybe 90.
So the request here, and this may or may not help, but the request was about flowers originally, so growing flowers for cut flowers. You know, a farmer who is, or somebody who had a small business. So,
So ornamental plant is defined in 6 VSA 1101. So it is defined there as perennials, annuals, and ground cover purposely planted for aesthetic reasons. You could consider adding the cross-reference there to be clear.
could we just change it to flowers?
Sure,
Does that open up another?
yeah, so
Set of questions.
I thought flower was vague.
Mhm.
But I'm not aware of a definition for flowers,
Oh.
but sure,
What
sure.
line is that on?
That is on
9,
I'm not-
page 2, line 9, yeah.
there are a lot of flowers that are invasive. Marijuana is a flower.
Well,
Yeah,
so
okay.
I thought about that too, flower.
when you think of ornamental plant, versus flowers, I think of flowers, I think of perennials. And someone wants to propagate rose bushes. And, you know, and then sell rose bushes to people, and someone may want to propagate other ornament, you know, nursery crop type plants to sell to other people.
So this, I think somebody was envisioning a specific going concern, a business where the person raised flowers for, you know, cut flowers that sell that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm personally of the opinion, let's not worry about the invasives in this right now. I think we need to get this through real soon.
Thank
And
you.
I think that, let's,
Second
I think
motion.
we could do something at state level. I don't think municipalities should really be the ones that are governing invasives anyway. Should be the state, so.
Okay.
I like Helen's idea of the cross-reference to the definition.
Okay. Okay.
When you said maple sap, that
Yeah.
for food, you know, on some of our streets, you got all these big maples and the kids tap them and they boil it in a turkey baster on the back lawn. So make a little syrup. Is that for food that wouldn't?
No, so that's, you're not gonna prohibit that. Not my watch anyway. So,
And just one last thing from our wedding business, I know, right, the sort of specific, flower farms that grow flowers for events. Flowers don't really work because, I mean, when you look at their sort of design, sometimes it's, half of it's various grasses or boughs or things like that. So
okay,
it's just a rabbit hole.
so ornamental plants, leave this, but add a cross-reference to clarify. Okay,
I have more information on noxious weeds if you want it.
yeah.
Don't weed up the garden.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So that's the list of things that are prohibited, that towns are prohibited from regulating and zoning. Then, I'll say also that the section 4, the farming study hasn't changed, although I can read through that if we have time. But section 3 is where the changes are. So section 3 on page 3 is amending 4412, which is what towns are required to do or what they're prohibited from doing further. So subdivision 15, line 12, No bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting the raising, feeding, or management of chickens, excluding roosters, for personal use, donation, or sale. Then 16 is no bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting farming, but may regulate the following for a farm or farm structure subject to the RAP rule on a parcel of less than 0.75 acres that was not operating as of July 1, 2026, and not on conserved land. It has then you can regulate ingress and egress of vehicular traffic and ensuring pedestrian safety, including regulating parking, signage, pavement markings, functional enclosure of livestock adjacent to roads. That was in your prior language. And then at the top of page 4, and citing and setback requirements. Which is, you had that also in yours, but there was some additional language about fire safety. So it just says now they can regulate citing and setbacks.
Did we lose anything critical by using this language? Just this citing and setbacks?
So what you had included, I think you had some discussion about in here that perhaps it was confusing. Your prior version said citing and setback requirements for new infrastructure, including farm structures, in a manner that does not create public safety concerns, including fire safety concerns to neighboring buildings. So I don't think that additional language is necessary unless you're trying to be narrower. Like that language said for new infrastructure, but we didn't know what that phrase meant. So that's why I didn't include it. Now just says that the town for this subset of farms can regulate siting and setbacks,
Okay,
which is traditionally one of the aspects of zoning.
okay. Let's keep going and then come back, because I know the 15 is, maybe this issue.
So those are the new sections, and then you have the farming study, the regulation of farming study, and it's pretty close to what you passed, but there was some additional, I think there was additional language added since the last time I was here. Okay, so the Secretary of Agriculture shall convene a stakeholder group to examine options to address conflicts between landowners. So this is on page 4, section 4. Conflicts between landowners that involve agricultural livestock activities in densely populated villages, towns, or cities in Vermont. At a minimum, the stakeholder group shall include membership-based agricultural organizations, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Vermont Farm to Plate, and individuals with expertise in local and regional planning, as well as zoning administration. The group shall consider options to address conflicts, including establishing or expanding the required agricultural practices rule to regulate livestock, particularly addressing stocking densities on parcels of less than 10 acres, utilizing ordinances to address livestock, protecting the right to grow food for personal consumption, including livestock, and creating rules like the Cannabis Control Board rule to enforce against an operation based on health, safety, or the integrity of the broader industry. On or before January 31st, 2027, the Secretary shall submit the report to committees on Ag, Environment, Senate committees on Ag and Natural Resources that summarizes findings, considerations, and any recommendations of the stakeholder group, and offer a recommendation from the Secretary on solutions, including recommended statutory changes or rulemaking that would best support municipalities when significant landowner conflicts arise regarding livestock.
So before I take questions, just context here was the stakeholders originally had asked to have in the bill some way to formally continue the conversations they were having. So we had put that in our bill, and then the Environment Committee looked at that, and they wanted to do a little bit more specifically, partly to address, you saw the part about stocking density, and that it's 10 acres rather than 4 acres, something else. This is entirely, there's nothing here that would change the law. So all they would do is make recommendations, and they would have to come back to the legislature. So with that, yeah, Richard.
Stakeholder group, does it go without saying that there'll be a representative from the Agency
Yeah,
of
because they're
Agriculture?
convening it.
They're convening it, okay,
Yeah.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, good, yeah, John.
I just wondered, is there a statutory definition of densely settled, so densely populated villages?
No.
Okay, so that it's up to this group to sort of define,
Yeah, I the beholder.
or cities too. I mean, like Virgins is a city, right? And Colchester's a town.
Yeah, it says cities or town, villages, towns or cities.
I think that the stakeholders have been identifying issues that have come up and what they have identified as densely populated or just where the conflicts have been occurring sometimes correlates with denser population than other places.
Let's just go back here. So a concern that was raised after I distributed this last night, and the Environment Committee folks looked at it and are distributing it too, I think, was that where we had poultry originally, now we've got chickens. And so I think we may want to change that back to poultry. I asked Ellen a couple of questions just because I wanted to be sure I understood what we were actually saying about a town's ability under different circumstances to control, for example, how many chickens or how many guinea hens or how many ducks, depending on whether you are farming or whether you're not farming, depending whether you're more than 3/4 or not. So Ellen, can you speak to that or talk about what you see as possible concern here between 15 and 16?
So you start by saying towns cannot regulate farms that are governed by the reps. You then go on to say, however, towns do have some authority to regulate chickens on a property. And so I guess I was wondering, and then if you change it to poultry, I was wondering if there was going to be a point at which someone, the line, and maybe this is not a huge problem, the line at which a town can say how many of a poultry or chicken you can have on a property, and then if that prevents someone from becoming a farm, like if there's a cap of only, I don't know what the chicken number is in the wraps.
100, I think.
Is it 100? So if a town says you cannot have more than 30 chickens, is someone then going to claim, well, if I can't have more than 30 chickens, how am I ever going to become a chicken farmer? Oh, this is a bad example. I was going to say there's a chicken and egg problem, but I'm wondering, and maybe this is not because I'm just thinking about this, but like, is there going to be is a cap a municipality could set going to prevent someone from becoming a farm that could be regulated? Maybe not.
What's the cap in this?
So the cap is completely hypothetical.
It's hypothetical.
The town here can't prohibit, but it can regulate.
Yeah, which could include setting a cap on the number of
I
birds.
think Essex has.
Essex has some regulations, yeah.
But does that only apply if you're less than 3/4 of an acre, Chair?
So you're less than
No.
there's an acre.
No.
No. And I think you're close to a solution here. And maybe that isn't fully an issue
Yeah.
because, but we haven't fully talked through this. I think this structure in this bill, I think, is different than ones we had talked about before. And so I think you're close, but just talking through what maybe would come up. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Schedule F. That's all, yeah, if you file a Schedule F, you can be under the wraps, correct?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so that would be like
what
a,
is necessary to be able to file a Schedule F?
Isn't it like $2,000 a income?
$2,000 of sales is one of the thresholds. Yep. So that would get you.
Is also a threshold.
Yep.
Can
It's on
I,
a separate threshold, but what,
yeah,
I'm not familiar with, in my mind, of the requirements of filing a Schedule F, what that pertains. Does anybody?
We need someone from tax.
Yeah.
Because that, if a Schedule F is relatively easy to be able to file in terms of like I made $50 on
Mhm.
selling eggs.
Okay,
I would assume that then you could be under the wraps and then you could have as many chickens as you want,
okay, yeah,
right?
But I got a similar thought.
yes, you,
Yeah, sure.
yes.
Yeah,
Which I won't speak too much more to because I'm supportive of such things and I have nobody else
yeah.
that's against.
Um, so when you say you think we're close,
Yeah, and part of it is because I don't have any background really on the wraps. I've been learning, but so that's where sort of my knowledge gap was. It's possible that it's fine.
John,
So what is the 3/4 of an acre trigger then? If Richard's example does not, it doesn't matter whether you have, chickens on under 3/4 or over 3/4. There's
So-
still potential municipal regulation, right?
Right, so this is saying that this town still can't prohibit farming, but they may apply some regulation if it is a farm on less than 3/4 of an acre and wasn't operating as of July 1, 2026, and not on conserved land. So if they are a new farm, not on conserved land, the town, and on the smaller parcel, even though they're farming, the town may still be able to regulate them.
Even though
But
they're
only-
following the wraps.
Yes, but only for the traffic and the siting setback requirements.
John,
So does that mean if they have 0.8 acres, they can't regulate the number of chickens? So,
I think that's the tension, well, so they can't regulate farming. This is the tension I was just trying to say I'm a little bit concerned about, that larger than that, towns cannot regulate farming. They do have some ability to regulate the number of birds.
well, I don't see what, I get, that's where I'm having the trouble. I don't see where it's saying they can regulate the number of birds.
So it's in subdivision 15, it's not specific about the type of regulation. So it just says towns are not allowed to prohibit, but they're still allowed to regulate poultry, which I do think could include number of birds.
great.
And this isn't necessarily related to what you're just talking about, but why do we have and not on conserved land?
Because if you are in land, Bluffside Farm down in Newport has been bought by the land trust. And say they sold a parcel to somebody down there to do some farming on. And it's right in the city of Newport. And it's all conserved by land trust. They can't tell them, you can't farm here because it's conserved land. That's where that works. And there's not a lot of examples like that. That land was worth buku bucks. The soils are deep, 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 it's got the lung. And I could go on forever, but anyways, that's the
Yeah,
long
and
and short of it.
I think the intent here was to, restrict as much as possible places where towns could regulate.
Yeah.
So it added, it was like after we had talked about the grandfathered properties, that towns couldn't regulate those, right there. Also saying, well, okay, if it's conserved land, even if it's not being farmed on July 1st, if it's conserved, we would also want to sort of give that the same special treatment.
So I think it would help if at the top of page 2, it says, the towns can't regulate farming under the wraps, except as described in section 4412. I think perhaps if I said 4412-16, then there was a clear link between these are the types of farming only that the town has some limited regulation over, and then that would prevent, hopefully, 15 from coming into being part of that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good.
And hey, that last section down here about forming the stakeholder group, that's the safety hatch on everything. So as they go forward with it and they see certain things arising, whether it's the League of Cities and Towns or it's the farmer groups, we can always make adjustments. if we don't do anything, we're all subject to zoning now.
So, poultry, go back to poultry instead of chickens. Poultry is what everybody has said all along.
I agree, because if someone wants to have 25 chickens or raise 6 turkeys to sell for Thanksgiving.
So I will say, and Ellen, I think maybe you answered this, but I want to ask it publicly. The way that this is currently drafted, if somebody wanted tomorrow in, right up the hill here on a 1/4 acre lot, they're pretty small, decided they wanted to have, I'm going to say turkeys. And so let's say the wraps say you need 100 turkeys. And that person bought 100 turkeys. The town has zoning and maybe says you can't have, you can only have 5 turkeys. He's got 100 turkeys, so he qualifies for the wraps. How is that going to be handled?
Under 16, the town would have authority to regulate their traffic and their sighting. Can the town control the number of birds? I don't think so in that situation because they're already under the wraps.
Okay. Just buying 100 turkeys would put them under the wraps.
I think
Not
so.
necessarily,
Okay, so then
because,
they haven't sold any yet.
can I explain?
Yeah.
To be subject to the wraps now, you need to have, 100 turkeys if that's the number, and then also be on 4 contiguous acres. And then so there's 2 requirements in the animal piece section of the wraps, and so we have to keep that in mind as well. However, there is a catch-all provision in the wrap saying if you're causing a problem with water, causing a water quality problem, the secretary can come in and after opportunity of a hearing, subject you to the wraps if you're raising animals, including birds. So sometimes you need 4 acres, and if you have less than 4 acres, the secretary has to make an individualized determination.
Okay. All right, this may or may not be perfect, but I'm sort of thinking, echoing Greg's sentiment earlier, we need to probably move things forward and me the good thing, and there's the Senate and all that. So
House Environment then looks at this?
this is their amendment
Okay.
nominally.
In name only.
I mean, no, to be fair, they, section 4 is theirs. Really, and they wanted the flowers, and we had a lot of conversation. So, and they're okay with this. And by the way, so are the farmers. So,
And what's the Chapin amendment coming, or is this it?
That-
This is it.
So you mentioned poultry a couple times, but it says chickens.
yeah, so we're gonna change that.
And what does poultry encompass? Is it?
Any domesticated birds.
There's,
That's the Title VI definition, which I was gonna put in there. Those are ratites,
I'd be
They're-
curious as to
ratites,
Oh.
I think.
real world experience with filing Schedule S for really small farms.
Hmm.
I mean, from what I'm reading, all you have to do is show that you are in the business of farming.
Mhm.
On Schedule F.
You might have to net less than 900 and some odd $1,000 from other endeavors besides agriculture too. I think I had to check a box on
You
that.
have to show a profit in at least 3 of the last 5 tax years or 2 of the last 7 years.
We ain't farming that.
Never happened.
So there's.
do you have what you need from us, Ellen?
Yeah, I'm gonna make these changes right now and then send it back to you. So
Change poultry and the cross reference to our definition, is that?
yeah, I was gonna also add at the top of page 2, the
Yeah.
reference to 16.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
Okay, so
So
yeah.
Yeah, three edits.
Just a quick straw poll. If we have Ellen make those changes, is everybody comfortable with my saying we told the committee and everyone was supportive?
To clarify the changes, poultry and you said
Ornamental plant definition.
putting a
Cross-reference.
cross reference. Okay.
Cross-reference
Yeah, I get that.
and There is, by the way, there is a change here that is the definition of farming, I think, that cross-references the RAPS rules. If this is in section 2. And I'm not sure whether we had that originally. I'm sorry, farm structure at the bottom of page 2. Farm structure was defined and then it's now has the same meaning as defined in the RAPS rule.
Oh, we talked.
That's not functionally a change, is it?
No.
It's the same definition.
No, I don't think so. I think you had talked about that a while ago, is that, what the process has been is that the Agency of Agriculture has used their process to verify that a structure is a farm structure and they're qualified for this. And I do think that is part of the RAPS rule, and that's why, yeah, it was more of a clarification than a change.
All right, we're done here. We're gonna head down to the floor. We are supposed to be on the floor for quite a while today, like after lunch. Yeah, so I know that we had been looking forward to have the Forest Products Association come in and give us an update. They know that we're running late, and I said if we have time, if the group here wants to stop in for a few minutes during lunchtime, if the committee would like to do that, and give them a chance just to say hello. Otherwise, I think it might be quite late this afternoon and they may have all left. So this is not a critical thing, but at lunchtime, maybe we can just check in and with one another and see if we've got 10 minutes or so.
I would eat, I slept fast, I'll eat fast and I'll check